Hi, this is a MemePlaya. Let's play with some memes. It was a bit of a struggle to figure out what type of episode to do next. For a bit, I was thinking of talking about the concepts of communism and the Venus Project, and now more recently a combination of communism and capitalism. However, it doesn't make much sense to just dive into a topic without discussing the format that's going to be used. My intent is to have a discussion that is as generalized as possible. What do I mean by that? I mean, I want to start out the videos where I start at the foundations of topics, and then narrow them down, always leaving, of course, things open to start the topics anew, probably starting with the former video. You could call this approach open source discussion. It's what most of the people on YouTube employ. Because I'm being so careful about this, I have given it a name, and perhaps an inaccurate name. I put it to you as being, accordingly, free to change. Generally, this thought of open source is assumed, and perhaps this lack of assumption will be a common theme on this channel. Before I get into open source, I want to talk about bias. I have bias, you have bias. The problem with bias is the disregardment of sources of information. It could also be called thinking with the blinders on. The problem with bias is, essentially, that of starting out narrow. You might, and probably will, miss something. Bias can also be helpful. In this line of thought, it's called filtering. If we had no bias, no filter whatsoever, we'd be rendered paralyzed. There's a lot of information out there. If you can't distinguish which information is important for whatever, you're never going to do the thing for which you've gathered the information. These are the two extremes, closing off prematurely, being narrow-minded, and being far too lax and open, too open-minded. Another way that comes to mind to describe this is bigot, or so open-minded that you'll believe anything. Your brain's falling out. My current biases, at least the ones that I think are relevant to this, are as follows. Atheism, tending towards anti-theism, though also spiritualist. This means that I lack belief in God or gods, that I advocate against what I consider to be a psychosis of the human mind, and that I am very intrigued with the question of the unknown. This is partially, maybe primarily, my reason behind studying human psychology. Anti-statism/anarchism. This means that I am very skeptical about authority figures, tending to assume that most are psychopaths, and aren't to be trusted in the least. This also ties in with the atheist spirituality, that of studying human psychology and groupthink. And to explain the first label, the state is defined as a group of people that has a monopoly on force that is backed up with the belief in their legitimacy to be the only ones using force. Part of what helped me decide what topic to do next was a book about politics titled, Are You Liberal, Conservative, or Confused? On page 17 of the book, the author's disclosure, some of the text reads, For reasons I don't understand, writers today are supposed to be objective. Few disclose what the viewpoints or opinions they use to decide what information is important and what is not, or what shall be presented or omitted. I do not adhere to this standard and make no pretense of being objective. I am biased in favor of liberty, free markets, and international neutrality, and proud of it. So, I disclose my viewpoint, which you will find explained in detail in my other books. This segment annoyed me so much when I first read it that, upon checking the book out again, I knew what I wanted my video to be about. Bias. Liberty is a meaningless word that you're supposed to say. It's like one of those beauties at a pageant gets her medal, and she's asked what she would like, and the default, of course, of what you're supposed to say is, World peace. I can't think of a more meaningless utterment. Well, I can, but that's beside the point. I fully recognize that my biases could be, and probably are likely to be, in some sort of way, utter bullshit. This I expect, partly because we're always categorizing and recategorizing things to understand the world. Because we're using words and the such to understand it, we're only seeing a fraction of it. Accordingly, our labels will be faulty, and will make unnecessary dichotomies. Perhaps this is the or a reason for war, but now I'm getting off topic. Here are my biases, and please do tear them apart and evaluate them, putting them through the fire of criticism constantly. And to end this segment with, I know what the author of the book was aiming at, and I pretty much agree with what he said in regard to bias. I'm a grammar and semantics Nazi. Shoot me. Alright, now to open source. What is open source? What does it mean? From Wikipedia. The concept of open source and free sharing of technology information existed long before computers. This statement implies that the term open source is coupled with computers, at least nowadays. This is pretty much true. With ideas and concepts, the corollary term, I assert, is meme. I'm using meme in a specific way, being a hybrid between a computeresque style of thinking and a theoretical human style of thinking. You could call this memetic engineering. We'll get into this later in this video. The label open source was adopted by some people in the free software movement at a strategy session held at Palo Alto, California, in reaction to Netscape's January 1998 announcement of a source code release for Navigator. The group of individuals at the session included Christine Peterson, who suggested open source, Todd Anderson, Larry Augustin, John Hall, Sam Auckman, Michael Tiemann, and Eric S. Raymond. Over the next week, Raymond and others worked on spreading the word. Linus Torvalds gave an all-important sanction to the following day. Phil Hughes offered a pulpit in Linux Journal. Richard Stallman, pioneer of the free software movement, flirted with adopting the term, but changed his mind. Those people who adopted the term used the opportunity before the release of Navigator's source code to free themselves of the ideological and confrontational connotations of the term free software. The term was given a big boost at an event organized in April 1998 by technology publisher Tim O'Reilly. Originally titled the Freeware Summit, and later known as the Open Source Summit, the event brought together the leaders of many of the most important free and open source projects, including Linus Torvalds, Larry Wall, Brian Behlendorf, Eric Allman, Guido van Rossum, Michael Tiemann, Paul Vixie, Jamie Zawinski of Netscape, and Eric Raymond. At that meeting, the confusion caused by the name free software was brought up. Tiemann argued for sourceware as the new term, while Raymond argued for open source. The assembled developers took a vote, and the winner was announced at a press conference that evening. 5 days later, Raymond made the first public call to the free software community to adopt the new term. The Open Source Initiative was formed shortly thereafter. The term open source describes practices in production and development that promote access to the end product source materials. Some consider open source a philosophy, others consider it a pragmatic methodology. Before the term open source became widely adopted, developers and producers used a variety of phrases to describe the concept. Open source gained hold with the rise of the internet, and the attendant need for massive retooling of computing source code. Opening source code enabled a self-enhancing diversity of production models, communication paths, and interactive communities. Subsequently, the new phrase open source software was born to describe the new environment that the new copyright, licensing, domain, and consumer issues created. The open source model includes the concept of concurrent yet different agendas, and differing approaches in production in contrast with the more centralized models of development, such as those typically used in commercial software companies. A main principle and practice of open source software development is pure production by bartering and collaboration with the end product source material, blueprints, and documentation available at no cost to the public. This is increasingly being applied in other fields of endeavor, such as biotechnology. Wikipedia is itself an example of open source. There is controversy surrounding Wikipedia, with two general reactions that can be seen: that of enjoying it and using it frequently, and that of avoiding it.
I want to just read one thing real fast, and I don't usually, I don't give definitions off of Wikipedia normally. At least I try not to if I can avoid it, because then a lot of people say, oh, it's a Wikipedia definition and not credible, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I'm taking this definition from Social Psychology, 7th edition by David G. Myers.
Why is there controversy surrounding Wikipedia? It boils down to an age-old struggle between tradition and the new kid on the block. That is, old versus new. The traditional encyclopedias are researched relentlessly, and it's very hard to get new information in. Can't just anyone edit in Wikipedia? Where's the security of the information? Where's the likelihood that it will be accurate? From the man on the left, Wikipedia is an attack on truth. The truth becomes truthiness. Anyone can edit the truth. Truth becomes a casualty. There is no truth keeper. This critique is an interesting one, especially since he seems to think that there is just one absolute truth. Yes, anyone can edit Wikipedia. The trust in encyclopedias that we shouldn't have is broken with this format. Don't rely on just one source for all of your information. There are more sides to the story than just one. From the man on the right, I don't see a rigorous security. the rigorous security from Wiki that I see from encyclopedias? How can I be sure that someone of lesser knowledge, and perhaps quite a bit more stubborn, won't just edit my entry to something that is false? You can't. And yes, information on Wikipedia can and will be false. And I have called this episode Open Source Bias because I'm pretty sure that I have and hold opinions that are utter crap. Because we all have biases, including myself, making it all open source and transparent makes it easier to see the bias. We can then take it out into the light and check if the bias makes sense. And, if it doesn't, figure out why it is or was there. Interestingly, people don't seem to have the same problem with videos or movies as they do with texts or dictionaries. The problem with books is that of using only a few sources, such as just the Bible. When presented with many sources in books, the result seems to be someone who may be more open-minded about the issue. The problem with videos and movies is just the opposite, that of having too many sources and too many distractions, in a sense. And in limiting exposure rather than expanding it is a balanced scene. This intrigues me. It makes me wonder what might happen with a hybrid of those, if this, what I'm doing, might be called that, in a sense. However this may end up, it will certainly be interesting. I hope you have enjoyed watching this. This is a MemePlaya, playing with memes and you.